Okay, class, this week we're going to start chapter 12, which is on social psychology. Okay, there we go. So social psychology is the influence of real, imagined, or implied presence of others. So what social psychology is looking at is pretty much how other people influence a person. So social psychology is very similar to sociology. If you've taken sociology before, a lot of the terms you learned in that class will be repeated in this chapter. So while sociology looks at society and kind of how it behaves, social psychology looks at the person within a society or within a culture and how that society and culture influence the person. So we're looking at the influence of real people in your life, imagined people in your life, or implied people in your life. So the imagined and implied can be if, you think somebody is watching you, or there's a belief that what you're doing is being evaluated somehow. So think about like when you're in a department store. Remember when we used to go shopping and you have the like the cameras inside little globe things on the ceiling, right? So there's like this implied presence that someone's watching you, so you shouldn't steal. So that will impact your behavior. So we're really looking at behaviors and thought processes and how other people influence them with social psychology. And for some reason there's a picture of a sheep. All right, so we're going to talk about 3 different types of social influence. So social influence is just the effect of other people on us, either real or imagined, doesn't matter. If we're being influenced because of another person, if that person's real, if they're implied or whatever, then social influence is happening to us. So the first type of social influence we're going to talk about is conformity. So conformity is changing your behavior to match what other people are doing. Right? So when your mom says, oh, if all your friends jumped off a bridge, would you do it too? The answer is probably yes. So we tend to think of conformity as kind of a bad thing, right? Oh, I don't want to conform to society's rules because, I'm unique or whatever. Conformity is actually really important because conformity ensures that we can all work together, right? You conform to the fact that we stop at stop signs and red lights, that we all wear clothes when we go out into the world, right? I kind of like that conformity. I don't want to see naked people everywhere. So conformity helps us survive because we're social animals, and it's important that we do conform to the laws and the rules of our culture and our society and things like that, and make sure that we fit in, right? Even people that call themselves, quote unquote nonconformists are still kind of conforming to that idea of a nonconformist, right? So conformity can be bad though, right? If everyone's doing something just because everyone else is doing it, but it's something that causes harm or is, bad in some way, or is, really hurting someone, that's when we really got to start to worry about conformity. So it can really, it can go both ways. We can have good conformity that keeps us all kind of living happily together, and then we can have bad conformity, which can be harmful. So in this chapter, I'm going to talk about some very specific experiments that were conducted by social psychologists and the people that conducted them. So it's important for you to know the names of the people, the experiments that they did, and why did they do the experiments? What were they investigating? All right, because all of this is going to show up on your final exam in a couple of weeks. So the first one we're going to talk about is Solomon Asch's study on conformity. So Asch was very interested in what kind of situations would get people to conform, what characteristics of a group, what details would make you more likely to conform to something, to do what other people are doing. So he created a very kind of well-designed study. Now, in social psychology, we're going to see a lot of what is called deception. Deception is when we lie to the person in the experiment about what we are studying. We're only allowed to use deception if the purpose of the study would be, or the findings of the study would be made invalid if the person we're studying on knew what was going on, right? We kind of have to lie to you to see what you would do in a situation. if we use deception, if we have to lie to our participants, then at the end of the study, you have to debrief them, which means you need to tell them, hey, we lied. Here's what the study is actually about. Here's why we had to lie to you, because we were studying this thing. So we're going to see a lot of deception in these studies. We're also going to see a lot of what are called confederates. A confederate is someone who works for the experimenter. They're usually graduate students or undergraduate students who work in the lab, and they are part of the study, but the person that they're experimenting on doesn't know that. So the person who's being experimented on, or the people being experimented on, don't know that confederates have been kind of mixed in with them. So deception and confederates are used a lot during social psych experiments. All right, so in Ash's study, we're going to have deception, we're going to have confederates, all that good stuff. So what Ash did was he would bring in a subject, so a guy in blue. We'd have him sit at a table with a bunch of other guys, around the same age as him, right? All kind of, supposedly like maybe college-age guys. Except that all the guys in red actually work for Solomon Asch. They're all his graduate students and like undergrad helpers. Only this guy's who we're experimenting on. But he doesn't know that. He thinks that everyone's here just to be part of this experiment. And they said that this is an experiment on perception. So we're going to deceive him because it's really a experiment on conformity. Now, if I told you, hey, I'm doing an experiment on conformity, if you already know I'm looking to see if you're going to conform, that's going to change your behavior, right? You're probably not going to conform. You're going to actively not conform because you know that's what I'm looking for. So I'm not going to tell you that's what I'm looking for, because if I were to tell you, it would ruin the experiment. So he thinks we're here to do a perceptual study. So in the study, you're shown the standard line here, and then you're shown these 3 comparison lines. And they say, okay, which one of the comparison lines is the same as the standard line, same length? Now, obviously the answer is A. It's a very simple question with a very simple answer. But what they did is they started with this guy and worked their way all the way around so that the guy we're experimenting on has to answer last. Well, this guy says B. And then this guy says B, 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 and then this guy says B. So by the time they got to this guy, first of all, he's starting to get really confused, right? Because he's looking over here and he's looking at this, and he's looking at this, and he's looking at this guy, and he's just like, what the hell's going on? What? Huh? What? And to make things even kind of more conformity ridden, he would have the people kind of make little comments. So they would say like, well, the answer is B, obviously. Only an idiot would not think it's B, right? It's so clear that it's B, right? You have to be a complete moron to not know it's B. So by the time it got to this guy, he's just like, well, I'm not an idiot. I'm not a moron. Everyone else said B. So 70% of the time, 70%, this guy would say B. He would give the wrong answer to conform with everybody else, even though he knows the answer is A. But he doesn't want to go against the norm of what everyone else is doing. So Asch ran the study multiple times, and what he found was that the things that make us more likely to conform are, number one, if we're made to feel like stupid or dumb or smaller if we don't conform. So by saying like, and only an idiot would think this way, only someone stupid, only a moron, right? Everyone who's smart knows it's this. You don't want to feel dumb. So you're going to say something that goes against what you're thinking because you want to feel like you're smart like everybody else. Another thing that increases conformity is the attractiveness of the group. So if you want to be like the group, you're more likely to conform to them than if you don't feel that attracted to the group. All right, think about, high school, right? People wanting to conform to the kids that they want to be friends with, right? I'm going to start acting like you. I'm going to start talking like you. And I may start believing in things that you believe in, even if it's not what I actually believe in, because I want to be like you. I want to conform to you. So if we had, if we brought in a student who's like a fashion design student, and we say, hey, we want you on this panel, and everyone on the panel are current fashion designers in the field, right? The tops of their field, the, directors of fashion houses. And then, you have them sit down believing that here's all these people that are very attractive people to me. They're people I want to be like. And you bring out the world's ugliest outfit, right? Made out of burlap. And all of the, so-called fashion designer people are like, oh, it's beautiful. It's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. Well, then fashion design students going to be like, oh, yes, it is. It's great. Even though it's hideous, I'm going to conform to what they're saying because I want to be like that group. But if we bring that same student in and we sit them and we say, well, you're going to be at a group of people who don't know a whole lot about fashion. We just took them off the street. And you bring in an ugly outfit and everyone's like, oh, the outfit's beautiful. The fashion design student will be like, no, it's not. You don't know what you're talking about. I don't want to be like you normal people. I want to be like a fashion person. So I'm going to be less likely to conform. So we don't conform with people that we don't find attractive or we don't want to be like. We tend to only really conform with people who are like us or who we want to be like, right? That's going to increase conformity. All right. Yeah. Okay. All right, so conformity can lead to what's called groupthink. So groupthink is when there's more concern for group cohesion than in actually assessing the facts or getting something right or doing the best work. So groupthink happens when you're working in a group and the group starts going in one direction, and even if some of the people don't think it's the right direction, you just kind of go along with it. And you just kind of keep going and going and going until maybe you get away from actually doing what you were supposed to be doing or not doing, something correctly or not getting it done right at all. So, groupthink can really make it so that you, don't do what you need to do or, do your best work. Groupthink happens a lot when you are working in groups, especially like in school. Right? If I told you guys you had to do a group project, you all would groan because most people don't like doing group projects. And there's lots of reasons why people don't like doing group projects. Most of the time people don't like doing group projects because there's always someone in the group who doesn't do their work. Right? There's always some sort of slacker or someone who doesn't do something. And then someone else or a couple of people end up doing more work than the other person. Right? So that's, and the idea is, well, at least we'll all pass, right? So instead of holding that person accountable for not doing their work, we kind of just all kind of agree, like, we'll just do the work for them, I guess, so that we can do okay. Or, something else will happen like that. So whenever I give group projects, I always give a option where you can kick someone out of your group. So if someone in the group isn't doing what they're supposed to do, you can kick them out. And then I would reduce the load on the work that you have to do by whatever percentage that person was carrying. So if it's a 4-person group, I would, say, okay, well, here's 25% less work you have to do once you kick someone out. And I rarely have anyone, I think of maybe 3 times in 18 years has anyone ever used the kick someone out of the group. Because again, it's this idea of we have to all get along. It's better if we all just, just do this and get it over with. And I had a group of girls once who, presented their final project, and it was not great. It was missing a bunch of information, and they got a C because it was C-level work. And they came to my office crying, tears, so many tears. Oh, the tears. This is why I keep Kleenex by my desk. Like, oh, but Professor Meyer, she didn't do her job and she didn't respond to emails and she was supposed to do this part of the PowerPoint and she didn't do it, and on and on and on about how this one girl didn't do anything in the group. And I said, well, why didn't you kick her out? And they said, well, we didn't want to be mean. More concerned for group cohesion. And I said, okay, well, you weren't mean, so you achieved that, and now you have a C. Like, that's what it is. You gave up your grade in order for there to be group cohesion because of groupthink. Right? We don't want to let that happen, right? Sometimes you have to be the person who speaks up and says, hey, this isn't working. We need to do something different. Or, hey, we're not even assessing all of the facts. We're not even seeing that here's a different option or here's something better. So conformity causes groupthink to happen. So we have had some pretty bad stuff happen historically that's been driven by groupthink. Most of y'all are way too young and weren't alive in 1986 when the Challenger happened. So what was going on in 1986, 1985 was that NASA wasn't getting as much funding as it used to get. People weren't that excited about space travel anymore. We'd already been to the moon. Nothing else really interesting had happened. We're like, meh, whatever. Why do they need money? And so NASA was like, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to send a real person up into space. And to get everybody on board with this, we're going to send a teacher. We're going to send a grade school teacher into space. And it's going to be awesome. And so they did this big PR campaign about, oh my goodness, a real person. It's a teacher. Teachers are, America's salvation, and we're going to send her into space. It's going to be the coolest thing ever. And all of America got really excited. We were like, yay! Here we go. We're going to send a teacher into space. Woohoo! And like everybody was watching when the Challenger space shuttle was taking off. Like, I remember this, pretty clearly, where, it was the olden days, and my teacher like wheeled in the AV cart and plugged in the TV and turned it on to the, one of the 4 channels we got. And, we're just sitting there, everyone, like every school kid in America had their TV on their AV cart, like gonna watch the teacher go into space. And the space shuttle took off, and it went up, and it went up, and it went up, and it exploded and killed everybody on board. And we all saw it happen. And it was horrific. It was and still is the worst tragedy that has ever happened in NASA history. And what does this have to do with groupthink? Well, because there was such a big PR thing. It's such a big push to have this happen. Things that they knew were wrong on the spaceship, things that mechanics knew were wrong, engineers knew were wrong, they didn't speak up. They didn't say anything. Or when they did, they were told to just, no, don't worry about it. Because multiple people knew that there was mechanical issues with the Challenger, knew that it was unsafe to send it into space. And they either didn't say, or when they did try and speak up, they were kind of quieted by groupthink, because that need for it to happen, it has to happen. We have to do this. We have to, get America behind space travel again, push them to not push the issue, and ended up killing, some people. And it was very, very not great. Another time it happened was in 2003, when most of you were in diapers, and we went to war in Iraq. So how does this relate to groupthink? Well, on September 11th, which some of you weren't even alive for, but those of you that are a little bit older and remember this, and those of you who are adults and do actually really remember this, September 11th was the pretty much worst thing to happen to America ever, and we watched it on TV. Right? We saw a plane, taking down the Twin Towers. We watched them fall. We watched people jumping out of windows to their deaths live on TV. And it was horrible. It was just the most gut-wrenching, awful thing ever. And so obviously everyone in America and really around the world was like, who did this? What happened? How did this happen? What's going on? Right? There were planes in the Twin Towers, planes in the Pentagon, a plane that was probably shot down, but quote unquote, taken down by the passengers, headed for the White House. Like, who was responsible? What's going to happen? We got to go get them. And so Osama bin Laden came on. He's like, hey, sup everybody, it was me, I did it, haha, suckers. And we're like, who's this guy? Let's find him. He's got to go. And so we were all very much behind, let's find this guy. Who are these Al-Qaeda people? Let's go get him. And so, go get him, find him, we hate them, bad, terror. And in 2003, President came on and said, all right, we really want to go to a war in Iraq. We're going to send troops to Iraq. And we're like, okay, is that where Osama bin Laden is? Well, could be. Didn't we think he was in Afghanistan? Isn't that where? Oh, yeah. So, could be. Maybe he's in Afghanistan. Probably in Afghanistan. But you know what? It's in Iraq. This guy, Saddam Hussein, and he really sucks. Which, he did, but there's a lot of people that suck. And so he has a friend who has a friend who has a cousin who has a girlfriend who has a friend who's totally friends with Osama bin Laden. And so we need to go to a war in Iraq. And everyone's like, okay, but where are we going to get Osama bin Laden? Are these the people that did September 11th? Yeah, sure, yeah. And by the way, in Iraq, they have these things called weapons of mass destruction. And those words, weapons of mass destruction, we were like, holy shit, weapons of mass destruction. What does that mean? Are they going to come? Are they going to get us again like they did? Scary, scary, scary. And, okay, we don't want Osama bin Laden to have these weapons of mass destruction, and we don't really like Saddam Hussein either. He's a bad guy. Okay, so maybe we should go to Iraq. So Congress voted, and the majority of people in Congress voted for us to go to war. Which, if you don't know by now, horribly bad decision, and just bad overall across the board. And yeah, Osama bin Laden not in Iraq. Didn't catch him for many, many more years. But when after the vote, social scientists went to individual Congress members and senators, in their offices when they weren't surrounded by everyone else, and said, do you think it's a good idea to go to war? The majority of them said no. The majority of them said, nope, don't think we should go to war. And why? Groupthink, right? I don't think we should go to war, but I think it's what the American people want us to do. Well, it's what everyone else was voting for. Well, it seemed like the right thing because everyone really seemed to want this. So we ended up going to this war, which we've been in, to some extent, like pretty much since then, due to groupthink in a matter of speaking, right? We were convinced of something, it wasn't true. Instead of assessing the facts, it was more about group cohesion and raw America. And we ended up, getting stuck in this, horrific war that cost, hundreds of thousands of lives.